Hi everyone, Munch the Fan Tofu here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Travis Scott record, Rodeo. Oh yeah, Travis Scott is a southern rapper and producer who sort of blew up, came out of nowhere as a Kanye protege, earning a few production credits on Kanye's last big commercial release, Yeezus. And after earning this Kanye West bump, Travis Scott did not take his time with releasing his own music. Right there in 2013, he had it ready, that Owl Pharaoh EP mixtape project. I thought this project was like just wall-to-wall dull. And if Kanye was grifting any ideas off of Travis in the studio, they were being altered to the point of like being nearly unrecognizable if they were landing on Yeezus. Either that or just given like this really high gloss finish so that they sounded just a little bit more commercial project ready. I guess the Owl Pharaoh stuff, maybe the budget wasn't as high, I don't know. On Travis's following project, Days Before Rodeo, this was the big teaser mixtape bringing us to this Rodeo project, he did very little of the production on here, at least from what I can tell from the credits, which at that point, why? Like, what are you doing here? Like, aren't you supposed to be the superstar producer? Why are you not producing on your own records? I just didn't get it, because he certainly wasn't bringing it on the rapping and the lyricism and just the flow side of things. Travis wasn't really coming across as this superstar, really great attention-grabbing voice. As far as sound quality goes, Days Before Rodeo definitely sounded better, but at this point, I just didn't really see Travis's potential. Like with Days Before Rodeo and with Owl Pharaoh, I thought the catchiest thing Travis had written was that pretty cool straight up ad-lib. Even with his 3500 single, which featured 2 Chainz and Future, I thought the production was heavy, it was pretty luscious. Travis's bars didn't really blow me away or anything like that, but Future and 2 Chainz sort of did their thing. It sounded decent. The hook was definitely standout, but the song standing at 7 minutes, I think really killed its single potential. So admittedly, I wasn't really that excited for this project, but then I read into the production credits on this thing, which you can see here. And they are pretty impressive, as you can see. Some pretty awesome names listed out in this thing, including Wonder Girl and Pharrell. And then I caught the features list, which had Kanye West, even Justin Bieber, Quavo of Migos, 2 Chainz and Future, as I said. T.I. does some of the like really strange, dramatic spoken word bits on the album here. Juicy J and Toro y Moi, who Travis has done music with before, land on this record too. So interest peaked. And while I don't think this record is perfect, I do feel like Travis has come into his own a great deal on this album. And I hear a specific idea and sound and kind of concept coming through on Rodeo. I think Travis has essentially taken that new Atlanta sound from artists like Future and OG Maco and Migos, from Young Thug and to an extent Chief Keef, all of the druggy lyrics, the trap-influenced percussion, the kind of wavy, slow-mo sounds, the auto-tune, the hedonism, the ballads, the singing, and also the kind of gimmicky ad-libs in the background. I think he's taken a little bit of a cue from the last A$AP Ferg album, Trap Lord, as well, with some of the very cavernous production, some of the very deep and gorgeous reverbs that are on some of these vocals here. But mostly Travis is borrowing from and focusing on this new generation of Atlanta-based artists, and he's kind of grabbing their respective sound, which he's always been influenced by to a great degree, being from Houston himself. I mean, he's probably deep into the world of Southern hip-hop, there's no doubt about that. So he's grabbing this sound, and he's kind of elevating it to this really beautiful, artsy level, and really making it kind of album worthy. Like this style of music, I think, has led to a lot of great singles, a lot of smash singles, a lot of club bangers, some decent mixtapes too, but rarely are these very same artists actually delivering commercial records that live up to the hype of these singles. Recently, I could think of Future's Dirty Sprite 2 as an example, which for what it was doing sounded like a very aesthetically cohesive record, kind of artsy in its own right with all of its very woozy, druggy, slow-mo sounds, but Future's singing and rapping and lyricism has its limitations. Future is not that great of a lyricist. He's not even really a good singer. The tracks didn't really develop in the way that you would want a good song to develop. But development is what Travis has plenty of on Rodeo. Surprisingly, Travis actually nabs the melody from Future's Rich Sex. Go back and listen to that track. And then listen to the second half of the song Oh My and this side. It's the same goddamn melody, but Travis actually extends it out a little bit and turns it into a tune and not just this redundant, dumbed down melodic phrase that gets tiresome by the time the song is over. The singing on this track, even though it is heavily auto-tuned, and on the first half with the song Oh My, it's very expressive. It's not like the auto-tune is just kind of covering up all the human elements of the voice. Travis uses auto-tune in a really effective manner throughout this record. Only in a few moments do I think it actually is to the detriment of this record. And this track, Oh My / Decide, actually features one of Travis's many beat shifts right in the middle of the song. And while in the past I didn't really enjoy what he was doing with these beat shifts because we were just going from one weak idea to another weak idea, I think on this record, I actually started to enjoy it, not because the beat shifts were all that well orchestrated. Sometimes, like on the song 90210, they're kind of weak, like we just kind of get this fade up of the next beat, seems a little, thrown together. But at least the respective halves, the respective sides to each song, the track we're transitioning from and the track we're transitioning to are good. Yeah. I said it, and I seriously mean it. I think Oh My is a fantastic song and a great start to this record. It's so cavernous. It's so dark. It's so eerie. I love the Oh My, Oh My. Ooh, it just gives me a chilly chill. And how we kind of move from this just very dark, just nocturnal trap ballad to this very just pretty kind of glamorous trap R&B tune is very sweet. It's very cool. It's like a very warm embrace after a very dark, cold, freezing night. Both sides of this track are incredibly intoxicating, potent, pretty to the ear. I love the intricacies of the production. Some of the synth leads on the second half of this track are gorgeous, beautiful, just really great beats on this thing. And Quavo's contributions to the first half and the second half of this track are great too. Him and Travis actually have quite a bit of chemistry together. And I like how this track is showing us different sides of Travis Scott too. We have this monstrous darkness on one half of this song. The whole thing kicks off with a track named Pornography, which kind of builds the album up to be this epic, a bit of a personal story of Travis's come up. And the second half of this track shows Travis being kind of personal and a little nostalgic. I mean, we're not exactly getting like a life story here, but it certainly feels like Travis is starting to use his music to come out of his shell and say something a little bit more personal, which he does again on the second half of 90210, a moment where I actually feel quite a bit of heart coming through on Travis's lyrics over this very glamorous boom bap beat, which features these really awesome grand pianos. And I actually don't mind the kind of porn star themed ballad that kicks the whole track off. I actually think it's another example of Travis taking that auto-tune backed ATL balladry and kind of elevating it, because if you isolate everything else out of the tune, aside from the auto-tune vocals and what Travis is singing lyrically, the instrumental here is actually gorgeous. I mean, the spacious drums, the female vocals on this track are wonderful. I don't know who's singing them. They seem to be uncredited. If you want to put that down there in the comments, that would be greatly appreciated. But the vocals, the guest vocals on this track are wonderful. They sound awesome. It's kind of like I'm actually listening to this fusion of like a really tender, delicate art pop song and like, I don't know, like a Migos track or something. It's crazy. At this point on the record, Travis is coming like dangerously close to perfectly embodying that whole idea, that whole notion of like high-end, highbrow, just high-class ignorance. Something I think someone like Kanye has tried to push in his music before, at least the idea of that, with songs specifically off of like the Cruel Summer mixtape. But I think Travis pulls it off maybe a little bit better, because while his instrumentals and his songs do sound very melodic and very fleshed out and artsy in a sense, his music still maintains like that street vibe, that street grittiness to it, that I think sort of a more established industry rapper wouldn't necessarily be able to pull off, because they're not as close to that lifestyle, they're not as close to that background as someone like Travis is. He is just coming from that world, and the sound that represents that world is fresh in his mind because he's living it as a young artist. One of the other things that I like about the instrumental on this track are the little layers of guitars that are very quiet but add so much character to some of these instrumentals when they do pop up, kind of like in the last third of the 3500 instrumental, a track that I'm enjoying so much more in the context of this record, though I still wish it was a little shorter, a little bit punchier. Going deeper into the track list, we have the incredibly sinister track Wasted with Juicy J. I think it's really grimy. It's got a lot of different parts to it. I think there are maybe a few spots here that kind of feel like a bit of dead air with the instrumental, and like not too much is going on lyrically, but you know, still it's a pretty decent track and a very dark moment on the record. The song Pray for Love with The Weeknd is definitely a lower point on the record for me, but not because of The Weeknd, as some of you may assume. It's actually one of the few moments where I wish Travis let up on the vocal effects a little bit, because Abel is a really capable singer and he can definitely hold his own. He doesn't need to be so heavily layered in effects. It's definitely ear grabbing at the very intro of this track, but once the bridge comes in and we get the whole "please don't pray for love" like sort of ascending vocal part, and we have one vocal effect on top of another vocal effect on top of another vocal effect, and it just becomes too much. And I think the very nice and sharp musical arrangements that are being sort of orchestrated at this bridge in the song are kind of being smothered by the fact the vocals sound so horrendous because of all the effects on every multi-track vocal. Still though, I like the instrumental on this track too. I like the dark building beat. Kind of reminded me of what Kanye has been doing recently on his own solo stuff, and sort of makes me think, you know, is this the kind of artistry that Kanye wanted in his own music, and that's why we're kind of seeing it come to light on this record over here? Is this the sort of stuff Travis Scott was bringing to the table during those Yeezus sessions, or is this just something that he's picking up because he was in on those sessions, and obviously the influence that him and Kanye have going for each other, it's obviously a two-way street. I think we get back to more effective songwriting on the track Night Call with Sway Lee of Drummer's Ear. I'm not pronouncing that backwards. And also Chief Keef. It is a pretty decent tune. I wish it had a grander intro like many other songs here do, rather than just kind of, you know, fading in, which was a little bit of a disappointment. But this track does have one of the more winning choruses on the entire record. When the night calls. Yeah, I get that there's not really too much to this track lyrically. You know, it's not deep or anything like that, but I think it kind of takes this whole notion of, you know, this late night hedonism and debauchery to this really kind of very pretty, woozy, intoxicating sort of aesthetic. Again, I push the idea that this is trying to make that hedonism, this is trying to make that ATL sound just sound a little more melodic, a little artsier, a little bit more refined, and a little bit more groomed. Not groomed for radio, but groomed so that the flavor isn't getting lost as you listen to it from the start of an album to the end of an album, sort of adding these wonderful melodic intricacies to the instrumentals so that these tracks are actually not one-dimensional. So while Sway Lee and Chief Keef might not exactly be saying anything deep on this track, I do appreciate their verses, especially Chief Keef's, for being as just kind of direct and as blunt as they are, which is especially the case on the song Piss on Your Grave, which takes a little time to get started with this weird psych rock intro, but once it really begins, you kind of hear Kanye's "Yeah!" A lot of people were really excited for this song because they wanted to hear Kanye. It sounds a lot like a track that could have landed on Yeezus, honestly, because vocally, it sounds like Kanye is still going down that same road that he was on Yeezus, sort of that whole "I am a god" kind of thing, which I believe is a track that Travis co-produced off of Yeezus. And I'm not so sure if this song is a leftover. A lot of people have alleged that, but I think Kanye is coming off way more extreme than he was on some of those Yeezus tracks and on some of his recent features. This feature seems just like way more over the top than any feature he's done as of late, which in a sense I found refreshing, although it did kind of feel like a bit of a temper tantrum. But ultimately what does end up making this song a bit of a low point for me on the record is that songwriting-wise, there clearly was not as much effort here as there was on many other tracks here. Travis and Kanye like trade a few bars here and there. They show some decent chemistry, but the song isn't really here on this track. Though, you know, again, I do kind of appreciate this track for kind of the energy shift at this point in the track list, which is something you've got to pay attention to because it's very clear that Travis put a lot of effort into the flow of this record. After this song, though, the hits on this album, I think, continue. The track Antidote, which does have this redundant little vocal melody, but I do love the beat, and I love how heavy and I love how bassy it is. Again, it's another woozy, intoxicating moment. It hits so hard, but it feels like I'm in the midst of a dream state. My one complaint about this track is that I think by the midpoint, we're really struggling for lyrics. We're really struggling for things to say. I don't do no hoes. I get that we're not trying to say anything deep on this record, but at least say something catchy or memorable or something. Still, there's some wonderful moments on this instrumental. The bridge has these wonderful synths on it, and Travis's verse toward the back end of this track isn't really bad either. I like the song Impossible directly after, which is kind of like this groovy, alluring dream sequence on the record, and lyrically like a bit of a monologue for Travis where he's talking about his dreams, his ambitions, I guess his worries, his stresses. It's kind of like this weird little internal monologue moment on the record. And with the track Maria, I'm Drunk, we have this beautiful little vocal intro, and then immediately we go into this track with Young Thug and Justin Bieber, a song that for many is probably going to be the most hated on the record. Justin Bieber, Young Thug, potentially a train wreck. I mean, not really two names a lot of people want to hear on a record, but songwriting-wise, this is one of my favorite tracks on the entire album. Not only is the refrain of this track killer, but I think Young Thug's voice on this track is awesome. I think a lot of people shit on Young Thug because they're holding him up to this rapper rubric when he couldn't even be further from trying to attempt to live up to that standard. I just kind of see him as a singer. Baby, call your friend and get drunk. There's something about his voice that is just so dynamic and all over the place on this track that really just pulls me in. And Justin Bieber, when he comes on, while, I mean, yeah, it's Justin Bieber, I think he fits into the aesthetic of the record really well. I don't think he does anything on his verse that like Sway Lee wasn't doing earlier on the record. So if you just hate his verse just because it's Justin Bieber, then, I mean, I don't really know what to tell you. I'm not really in love with it. It's not a high point for me on the record, but he didn't stick out like a sore thumb or anything, which is maybe all I could have really asked for. Justin, he just wants to know what that booty do. And that dreary little piano line and that freaking ascending bass line, that boop, 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 both awesome. Both good. And the record finishes off relatively strong too. The very evil and melodic I Can Tell is haunting, very haunting. And the song Apple Pie is kind of like a warm goodbye, with Travis kind of saying farewell to his mother and his old life. And it's really just kind of a tune of becoming self-sufficient and going out there on your own and taking that risk and becoming your own man, really. And even though I wish this album had a grander finish, in a way, it did kind of feel like a fitting cliffhanger. I feel like we kind of got a little bit of a picture of who Travis is and kind of how he's growing as an artist and sort of what he's trying to do. And T.I. does a pretty decent job at various points of this record kind of enhancing that story and adding a bit of poetry here and there and adding a bit of drama, and at the very end of this record kind of exposing to the audience exactly what the whole meaning and concept behind the idea of the rodeo is. And before I move into the final moment of the review, I do want to mention that Flying High is another track on this record that I enjoy a lot too. Toi et moi is featured on this track, and what a surprisingly creative and good and cohesive meld of Travis's and Toi et moi's respective styles. This is like a sun-drenched, beach-ready banger, and the way Chaz's vocals kind of soar over the chorus on this thing, that sort of thing. They sound fun, they sound sweet, they sound great, and Travis just sounds so relaxed and laid back and charismatic on this track. And I love the bass, and I love the twittering hi-hats on this thing. It's a solid cut, man, and a nice kind of banger to help the last leg of this record. And yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of floored. I thought this record was really good. I thought it was really, really good. It was surprisingly good. I did not anticipate Travis Scott to come through with something that I really enjoyed as much as I enjoy as this thing. I often have been returning to this record since I've had it, and I've been like, do I really like this? Do I really like this? Am I sure I like this? And yeah, I'm pretty sure I like it. I think what Travis is doing with this ATL sound, this southern sound right here on this record is very interesting. And I think he's doing a lot of these southern artists, these newer southern artists. I think he's doing a lot of these trap artists, a lot of these, trap balladeers a service by putting this sound to a full-length album that is, for the most part, enjoyable from front to back. A few lulls here and there, a few weak tracks here and there, but I think Travis put together a really solid project and did a great job of bringing on a lot of artists that are representative of this sound so that we have kind of like a communal celebration of this style, of this musical trend right here. And again, set to instrumentals and tunes that are a little more artful and a little more accessible and a little bit more intricate. I didn't really like his past two projects at all. And I feel like the difference between what he's done over the past few years and what he did here is like night and day. And some of the changes that he's made to his style and his sound have been very minuscule on some of these songs, but they've made all the difference. I'm feeling a 8 on this thing. Transition. What'd you think of this record? It's bedtime. It's bedtime. Good night.